Since Etsy changed their policy a few years ago and now allows shops to have production partners, the number of POD, which stands for print on demand shops, has literally exploded. There's tons. And the number one question I get all the time is, does POD actually work? Can people actually make money running a print on demand shop? A lot of people are thinking about doing it because they see all these other people doing it. Some are successful, and some are not. Today, I want to dive into this topic so that you guys know if POD is right for you and your business going forward. Let's go. All right, guys, what is happening? Glad to be back with you guys as usual. Welcome to the Handmade and Beyond podcast. I am your host and guide, LL. Glad to be back with you. Like I said, as usual, going to be a little bit redundant today. I'm a little kind of all over the place. I'm in the middle of a move. I'm getting ready to get out of this current house and move into my RV. Like I talked about, I think it was the last episode. I don't know. Things are crazy. I'm trying to manage my business and move at the same time, which I'm sure you guys, and those of you that done it, know that it is not fun. There's there's a lot going on. I'm just trying to keep all my ducks in a row and try to stay sane as much as possible. Anyway, I'm super excited about today's topic because I get a lot of questions about it, and that's why I want to, cover it more in depth for you today. But before I get started, if you're new to selling on Etsy or you've been selling on Etsy for a while, you know that reviews are probably one of the most important aspects of selling on Etsy or online anywhere. Getting 5-star reviews will help your business, not only with the algorithm with SEO, but it'll help other customers see those 5-star reviews and want to buy from your shop. It's the single best thing that you guys can do to give your shop a boost. Get more 5-star reviews. That's why I have something for you. I have a 5-star review formula that you guys can download for free to help give you the tips, strategies, and best practices to get more 5-star reviews so you guys can get that boost in your shop, which is what I want for you. So you guys can get that at handmadeandbeyond.com/review formula. Download that today and give your shop that boost with reviews. All right. So today's topic, let's dive into this. Does POD actually work? Can you make money doing it? You're going to hate my answer because I'm going to tell you it's both yes and no. There's people making plenty of money doing it. There's people making no money doing it. It's just like any business. Some people are successful at it. Some people fail. It's no different. It really doesn't matter if it's POD or not. So usually a lot of it really comes down to why you started it in the first place, or your why. So what happens with POD, and it's one of those things nowadays that you see a lot on social media and on the different various channels, the influencers, yada yada. You see them being successful. Oh, I opened my POD business and I made $100,000 overnight. That type of thing really leads people in the wrong direction and gives them the wrong mindset when it comes to opening a POD shop. You should not open a POD shop if all you care about is trying to make, a quick buck, trying to do the get rich quick thing, trying to follow the quote unquote successful influencer that makes all this money through POD. You can't see behind the scenes. You don't know what else they've done. You don't know if they've actually made that. So do it if it's right for you, but don't do it just to make a quick buck, to try to try to do the get rich quick thing. That's where you see people really fail when it comes to the POD stuff, because they're in it for the wrong reasons. So don't do it if that's what you're trying to get out of it. Now, if you're super passionate about it and you have a good niche, a good business, it's something that you genuinely care about, then it's something that, of course, you can make work. If you're in it for the long haul, yeah, you can make it work, but it's going to take time. It's probably not going to happen overnight. You can't expect any business to be an overnight success. It takes usually years to build, and that's where people get themselves in trouble. And that's why I try to give people the right expectations with starting an Etsy business or a handmade business, is chances are you're not going to wake up and be able to do it full time. You got to start chipping away at it. You got to start somewhere, but it's delayed gratification. And a lot of people don't like delayed gratification. A lot of people want that instant gratification. You got to work for free first before you get paid. And a lot of people don't like that, but that's just part of being a business owner. But if you're going into it with the right, those expectations, and you have good ideas, and it's something that you're passionate about, it your niche, you care about it, then there's a really good chance that you can be successful. And we've all seen that, those POD shops where they're in it for the quick buck. You can usually tell, everything's just thrown in there. It makes no sense. There's no you can tell there's no clear vision, there's no clear niche, there's no clear branding. People are just throwing random designs in a shop, and it makes a little sense. They heard that if they throw up 100 POD listings, selling random stuff, that they can make a quick buck, and that's usually not the case. Usually those shops aren't going to make any money or very little, and then they're going to close down in a few months because they're like, POD doesn't work, this Etsy thing doesn't work, and they're going to close down. But that's a good thing, because that opens the door for the POD shops that are in it for the long haul, that want to be successful. We can get rid of those people that are in it for the wrong reasons, and they will go bye-bye, and you'll stay the course, and you'll end up being successful down the road. And that is the ultimate goal, and that's what you have to think about. If you continue going down that road, you will ultimately find some success. It's just a matter of how long you're willing to stick with it before you get to that success. So knowing that POD success, now that I gave you a kind of a, I guess that was kind of a pep talk. It's funny how all these episodes eventually turn into LL's pep talk, but sometimes you need it. Sometimes I need it for myself. But knowing that POD success really comes down to you at the end of the day, I wanted to go through some pros and cons to really help you decide if this is something that's right for you, because I think a lot of people don't realize the pros and cons when it comes to POD. And it may be something that either causes you to get into the POD model or causes you to get out of the POD model. But either way, it's always good to have a pros and cons list so that you can make an educated decision and you know what you're getting into with really any type of business model. So I want to dive into the pros first, the good, and then I'll dive into the cons. And mind you, I have done the POD model. I am doing the POD model. It is not something that is a big part of my business structure, but I am doing it, and I do supplement my business with it. So just this is stuff that I'm speaking off of my own personal experiences, and some of it's opinion based, but it's my own experiences and expertise with it as well. So let's dive into some pros. The biggest pro and the biggest reason that people do it is because you don't have inventory. You don't have to have a bunch of stuff filling up your house, your garage, and then ship the stuff out. It's all done for you by a third party. So you don't have to have all that stuff and be able to you don't have to make the products. And like I said, you don't have to ship it. So that's really nice, not having the inventory and not having to ship the products, because that is the making and the shipping are the biggest time consumers when it comes to selling with your handmade business. So if you could have someone else do that, hey, that's a pretty big perk. And that's a great reason to get into the POD model. The other thing, not having inventory, is it's very inexpensive. You don't have to buy a bunch of stuff up front and hope that it sells. You don't have to buy anything. The third party has to eat that cost. So you can just put stuff out there. If it sells, cool. If it doesn't, you're not out any money in terms of the supplies. Now you still have to pay to list it and all that stuff, but that is very inexpensive compared to having to buy all that inventory up front. The next thing, the next pro is it's easy to do. It's very easy to set up a POD shop and get started. There's a lot of different tools, and they really have streamlined it to be able to set it up. There's a couple of POD companies. Well, actually, there's a lot of POD companies, but there are a couple really big ones that have really made things easy, as far as pretty much anyone could set up a POD shop. The other pro is it allows you to quickly add lots of listings, because you can, without you actually having the products and having to make them. You can do mock-ups and different things like that, and you can quickly add a lot of listings. And as you may know or not know, a lot more listings are better than less listings when it comes to selling online, because it's a numbers game to a certain extent. If you're selling junk, 2,000 listings isn't going to help you. But if you're selling stuff that's creative, that's your own, that's a good niche, yeah, then more listings can definitely help you. There is a correlation between more listings than sales as opposed to less listings than sales. While it's not a direct correlation, just because you add 25% more listings doesn't mean you're going to add 25% more sales. But it will help you as far as get you seen more, get you more traffic, and then from there, hopefully get you more sales as well. The other pro, kind of like I mentioned before, is there's companies that integrate and allows you to set up a POD shop really easy, but they integrate with Etsy, which once they're set up, this is the other big reason, probably the number one reason that people get started with POD is once everything's set up, it is passive income. Literally, if it's integrated with Etsy, once someone buys, it goes to that third party. They do it. They produce the product and ship it. You literally don't have to do anything besides collect the money, and that's passive too, because it automatically gets dumped into your bank account. If granted, if you don't owe Etsy any money and are not in the negative. So that's what that is kind of the allure. It's like, woo, it's passive income. I don't have to do anything, but it's really not passive income because you can't set it and forget it. You still got to work on your shop. And if you're in it for passive, you want everything to be 100% passive, you just want to put up 100 listings and not do anything else, then I would probably warn you, this is probably not for you. It's not going to last. But there is a passive aspect of it, which is kind of cool once you get that stuff set up. So that I agree, and I understand the allure of that, but don't go into it thinking that it's completely passive. That is kind of a myth. I think there's not anything that's 100% passive. You still got to maintain it, monitor, manage it. So that is not passive. All right, the other thing, and the last pro that I'm going to leave you with, and this is kind of a little redundant. There's lots of tools at your disposal now that you can use, and a lot of the POD companies have these tools. Being able to easily create mock-ups, easily create designs, easily integrate. So it's everything is there for you. It's there for the taking. It's easier than ever before, which is why there's been an explosion of POD shops for good and for good reasons and for bad reasons. Put it that way. But there are, if it's something that you want to do, you can 100% do it, and you can do it very fast and very cost effectively because of all the tools out there. So those are the pros. Those are the good. There's a lot of good when it comes to POD. There's a lot of good aspects of it, and I can see why people want to do it. And those are the reasons why I wanted to integrate some POD into my business as well. So let's go hit up the cons now. And this may be some stuff you thought about, and it may not. But I'm going to dive into it nonetheless so you guys know what the heck you're getting yourselves into. All right. So the first con is kind of it's the opposite of the pro. If where the pro is, it can be inexpensive. The con is it can be expensive if you're not making any sales. So if you have a bunch of listings and you're not making any sales, the renewal fees can get up there. It can get expensive. 1,000 listings will cost you $200 in renewal fees every 4 months. So if you're not making any sales to cover that, and you're just pumping out all these listings, it can get, with renewal fees alone, even though they're not that much, it can get very, very expensive for you. So that's why you got to have a clear vision and a brand and do it for the right reasons. Otherwise, your listings are just going to sit there and you're just going to be paying for renewal fees if they're not selling. The other con, and this is probably, I think, the biggest con, and that is there is a low profit margin when it comes to POD because you're partnering with a third-party company. The third-party company takes the majority of your profit because they're doing all the work. They're doing the production, and they're doing the shipping. So they're going to take the big chunk of the profit. Usually, in order to stay competitive you usually have to accept a 10 to 15% profit margin. Now, you can set your own pricing. You can charge whatever you want for your stuff, but people probably aren't going to buy it, and there's so much competition that you got to be somewhat competitive. Now, if you're selling something that's 100% unique, design wise, something that's super popular, then you can probably charge a little bit more. But that's usually few and far between, where it's something that's so crazy that you can charge a premium. So think of it that way. This is all part of pricing your stuff. You got to be somewhat competitive. Now, you don't have to go the cheapest. You don't have to, do that. A lot of people think that in order to get more sales, they have to go cheap. That's not a good strategy, because it cheapens your product and people are going to think it's a cheap product. And then you're just going to price yourself out of business. So set your prices accordingly. Obviously, do your research as far as what you think you can charge for your stuff. But usually, in my experience, to stay competitive, that's kind of where your profit margin lands, and that's really not a lot of profit. You personally like to stay within a 50% profit margin. I produce my own clothing, my own graphic tees. That's where I like to land, 50%. That's a pretty good incentive for me to keep going. It's a lot of wiggle room in profit. So that is where I like to stay. But keep in mind, if you're at a 10% profit margin, you got to sell 5 times as many items in order to make the same amount of profit. So you got to sell way more to make the same amount of profit as if you were doing it on your own, which I get it. You may not be able to do the stuff or want to do the stuff on your own. There's a lot of pros to not doing it on your own, like I just talked about. So keep that in mind. That's the hardest pill to swallow, is the low profit margin when it comes to POD. So you just have to make sure that you are aware of that, and you got to sell more to make more when it comes to that. The other thing, kind of along the same lines, is it's hard to run promotions and sales with that low of a profit margin, because you have to consider the fees, you have to consider all that stuff. And sales are good. That's a good strategy. It's a good way to make additional to get more buyers, to make additional revenue. But when you're sitting at a 10% profit margin and you run 10% off sale, even that little of a sale, that pretty much eats up your entire profit margin. So it's really, really hard to run promotions. And that's just something that you have to be aware of when you're setting your prices. If you want to set your prices a little bit higher so that you can run sales to take that amount off, that's one thing that you can consider as well. So it just makes things a little bit tighter. The other con is, especially now, expenses are rising. In material costs, I've noticed, a lot of, my clothing, a lot of the shirts and stuff that I get from my manufacturer have went up over $1, which is a ton. If you sell 5,000 shirts, that's 5,000 extra dollars that I'm spending per year on material costs alone. Fees that went up, like it or not, Etsy fees just went up. Shipping has just gone up. So all that stuff cuts into your profit margin. Now, you're doing POD. Those are the costs that they're seeing, which is going to reflect on your side when it comes to how much you're paying them. So they are absolutely going to raise their prices to account for these rising fees, which is going to give you, at the end of the day, even less of a profit margin. And that's something that you just have to deal with because you're partnering with them. The other con is you have no control over production of the items. So you have no control of the quality. Hopefully you've done your research, and that's something that I would make sure that you're testing that stuff out when it comes to when you select a POD company. Order something so that you can see the quality. Make sure that it's good quality. It's not wonky when you get it. It's not crooked. It doesn't smell funny. So it's something that you just have to be aware of. You don't want to start sending people stuff that you didn't test out, and they're getting it's all crazy, it's all wonky, and then they're giving you bad reviews. That is not a good thing. So make sure you're testing it out. I'm not saying going crazy and buying one of everything, but buy one or two things, kind of see what the quality is. A lot of POD companies will give you sample orders at a heavy discount. So that's a good way to test stuff out as well. The other con is longer shipping times. Sometimes, depending on where it's coming from, it can extend the shipping times. people aren't getting stuff as fast. And as you know, we're in an Amazon society. People like stuff overnighted or next day, depending on where you're at. Amazon delivers the same day now, so they're delivering at lightning speed. So you always have to be mindful of how long stuff is taking to get shipped out. And that's another thing that you want to test out. Order something, see from the time that you order it, how long it takes to get to you. Obviously, wherever they're shipping it from will matter, but it'll still give you a good gauge of how long it's taking them to produce the item and then actually get it in the mail and then for you to actually get it. And that brings us to the last con, where I said, as far as the pro, there's lots of tools, lots of mock-up tools, lots of easy things that you can do to create these POD shops quickly. The mock-ups sometimes look fake depending on what you're using. I mean, and not to mention everyone's using those same mock-ups. So that, to me, it just looks, even though it may look nice, you can just tell it's not real. It's not real life. So keep that in mind as well. Make sure if you're doing mock-ups, you're choosing the right ones, or maybe even doing your own mock-ups. You can create your own mock-ups. There's different programs and different templates just to make it different, make it stand out. Because if everyone's using the same mock-ups, or all your mock-ups are the same, all your backdrops are the same for every single item, it's going to people are going to notice that, and it's going to look weird. It's going to look fake. So that's just one thing I don't really necessarily like. It's really easy to see a POD shop because a lot of times the mock-ups kind of give it away. And that's just that's more of an opinion, but it's just my personal preference and something to just be careful of. Now, granted, there are some really good mock-ups out there. So it just be selective when you're creating them. Make sure it looks good and it doesn't look run of the mill, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that's it, guys. Those are the pros and cons, and that's the things that I wanted to cover today, because I know I get the POD questions a lot. If you're looking to start one, hopefully that helps you guys out so that you're going into it with the right information, the right expectations. Hopefully this doesn't deter you. Just look at the pros and cons and see if it's right for you. You can 100% still have a successful POD business. I always tell people, don't let the competition deter you. Competition is good. That means there's a high demand usually. You can still break in. You can still find your own niche or your own sub niche and still be successful. The biggest cop out, the biggest thing that the reason that people have for not starting is, there's too much competition, or it's too saturated. That's a cop out at the end of the day. So it's either, do you want to do it or you don't want to do it? If you want to do it, you can make it happen. It's easier now than ever. You just have to make the decision of whether you want to do the actual POD part or not. And hopefully this episode will help you guys out. But that is it. Make sure you guys get the Etsy 5-star review formula that I talked about earlier, so that if you have an Etsy shop, you are focused on getting more reviews, which will help you get more buyers, more customers, more money at the end of the day. So you can get that at handmadeandbeyond.com/review formula. All right, guys, that is it. Hopefully that helps. I'll be back soon with another episode for you. Have an amazing rest of your day. Talk to you later.